Hello and welcome back to anyone and everyone watching. In this video, we're going to be taking another look back at a remarkable race for an otherwise very unremarkable team. I made a video like this a while ago where I went over Rick Ware Racing's best ever NASCAR race, and today I'll be doing the same but for the former Cup Series team Circle Sport Racing. This team, owned by former late model racer Joe Falk, was mostly known for being one of the slowest teams of their time, as despite competing in some capacity from 2011 to 2017, they only scored 2 top 10 finishes and 26 lead lap finishes. However, Falk as an owner actually has 2 more top 10s to his name, both of which came with the short-lived LJ Racing venture and driver Todd Bodine. After partnering with Ron Neal, Falk's first effort in the Cup Series ranged from 1997 to 2000, where in addition to Bodine, he fielded the number 91 Chevy Monte Carlo for several well-known drivers, such as Greg Sachs, Ron Hornaday Jr., Morgan Shepherd, and even the infamous Dick Trickle. But the results were still plagued with numerous DNQs. Returning under the LTD Powersports name over a decade later in 2011, Falk's Cup team competed with the rookie driver TJ Bell and failed to finish a single race as they either start and parked or failed to qualify in each of their 13 attempts. The team, which then rebranded to Hillman-Circle Sport in partnership with Mike Hillman in 2012, continued to start and park the majority of their races, but now ran the number 33 after purchasing it from Richard Childress Racing earlier on that year. However, this wasn't a complete buyout, as RCR would still use the 33 car from time to time for their development drivers Austin Dillon and Brian Scott, and therefore would share owner's points with Circle Sport. In 2013 and so far into 2014, the team's primary driver was Landon Castle, who despite a lack of consistent sponsorship had been running most of his races from start to finish, and was beginning to show improvement. While he was unable to score a single finish inside the top half of the field just the year prior, in 2014, Castle had made the most of his superspeedway starts with a P12 in the Daytona 500 and a P11 in the Aaron's 499 at Talladega. Heading into the 4th and final superspeedway race that year, Talladega's Geico 500, Castle was fresh off 2 top 25 finishes on the mile-and-a-half tracks, a truly impressive feat for a struggling team. First with a 21st place and lead lap run at Kansas, and then with a 23rd place effort at Charlotte, he had outperformed all of his fellow backmarkers and even a handful of big-name teams in races that saw relatively little chaos. Now preparing for a race that would likely see plenty of chaos, Castle had good momentum behind him and would look to put together yet another solid finish in his number 40 car. Behind the wheel of the team's second car, the 33, which had been driven by multiple drivers that year, would be the 2003 Truck Series champion Travis Kvappel. Kvappel was a new addition to the team, having first raced for them only a few weeks ago at Chicagoland, where he came home in 38th, 11 laps down. In addition to that start, Kvappel had spent much of the 2014 season racing for GoFaz Racing, but there he failed to replicate any of his good underdog results of the past 2 years he had with BK Racing, as he had only mustered up a best finish of 25th thus far. Qualifying for the Geico 500 was set to be just as interesting as in the other superspeedway races that season, because it would feature NASCAR's new knockout-style format. Debuting after the Daytona 500 that year, group qualifying was intended to add some type of excitement and entertainment value to the otherwise boring concept of single-car qualifying. But on a superspeedway, boring is often best in terms of qualifying, because while group qualifying did add some excitement on the non-plate tracks at least initially, on the big tracks it only caused problems. Well, that is assuming viewers don't like seeing multi-car qualifying crashes in starting grids that looked like they were created by a random draw, which I'm sure a lot actually did, including myself. But obviously that is neither good for the teams nor the integrity of the sport, so following the Geico 500, NASCAR would opt to return to classic single-car qualifying for all future superspeedway races. In this final usage of the group format, though, the pole would go to Michael Waltrip Racing's Brian Vickers, and as you can see, the rest of the qualifying results appear just as shocking as they did in the spring race. Starting 7th would be none other than Travis Kvappel in his unsponsored black and pink number 33, while back in 29th was the other Hillman-Circle Sport entry of Landon Castle and the CarsForSale.com sponsored number 40. 5 of the 6 worst qualifiers were playoff drivers, and almost comically, the Roush and H. Scott drivers of Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and Justin Allgaier, who timed in 18th and 19th quickest in the first round, would end up missing the race because they each started their hot lap after the qualifying timer had ran out. So, needless to say, the race weekend was not off to a good start from a professionalism standpoint. But with those shenanigans aside, the race went underway the following afternoon, no different than any other. That is, unless you're a Stenhouse or Allgaier fan.
The number of lead changes in this race will probably be 30 or better, almost nonstop. And remember the unique location of the start and finish line at Talladega, not in the tri-oval, but past that, halfway between that tri-oval and turn one. Massive crowd here on a beautiful day for a race that's fun for us, if frightening for the drivers. It's the Geico 500 at Talladega. The final race in the contender round of the chase. 4 drivers' championship hopes end today.
Not that it was of any worry to the Circle Sport team, but this race was also the cutoff to the round of 8 in the inaugural playoffs. Because of that, some of the few playoff drivers that were able to qualify up front, such as Carl Edwards and Ryan Newman, would peel off to the apron and drop to the back in order to play it safe. The first lap was led by the second-place starter and defending champ Jimmie Johnson, but his line's momentum soon faded away and Ryan Blaney got past him at the head of the much more organized inside line. Blaney, driving the Penske number 12, was starting just his second Cup Series race and would go on to lead until lap 14. However, it was not much of a surprise that the newcomer was overachieving, as he had already been doing just that in the lower series. On top of picking up 2 Xfinity Series wins while racing part-time with Penske, Blaney was sitting a close second in the Truck Series standings, coming off a solid 5th place in Saturday's truck race. Meanwhile, just past lap 20, the field had remained calm and clean overall, but nevertheless, some drivers were quietly on the move. One of which was Dale Earnhardt Jr., who had entered the race tied with Jimmie Johnson at 26 points below the round of 8 cutoff line. Feeling the pressure, Jr. had weaved through the pack from his 28th place starting spot to now run right behind Jimmie Johnson in second. Also in the top 5 was another playoff driver of Denny Hamlin, who had come into the Geico 500 on the positive side of the cut line, and quickly worked his way up from his lousy 38th place spot on the grid. The 6th, 7th, and 8th place drivers of McMurray, Logano, and Harvick also all started outside the top 30. But more surprising than all of their efforts combined was that of the 29th place starter and driver who had just cracked the top 10, Landon Castle. Given that Cavapo was also still floating around the top 20, it was clear already that Hillman-Circle Sport did not come to play it safe and was intent on having the cars run in the pack all race long.
For Tom Baldwin Racing, running up into the lead group. 33 driven today. I mentioned Quapple just a minute ago. 83, J.J. Yaley was the other one. I knew there were some 3s involved there somewhere. Beginning to move up.
Thus far in the race, it was Jimmie Johnson who led the vast majority of laps and whose Hendrick teammates had appeared equally as fast. But just short of lap 40, green flag pit stops were sure to shuffle things up. After the final 2 stragglers of Tony Stewart and Danica Patrick made their stops on lap 44, the lead had shifted to Casey Kane with McMurray battling right to his outside, and Johnson now mired into the middle of the pack. As the laps ticked on by and the racing intensity settled back down, the top 10 saw a few notable underdogs such as Tommy Baldwin Racing's Reed Sorensen, Levine Family Racing's Michael McDowell, and even BK Racing's J.J. Yaley. And Sorensen, who reached as high as 3rd during that run, shouldn't have even been racing. Originally following qualifying, he was scored 44th and therefore was set to join Stenhouse and Allgaier on their way back to the shop. But luckily for him, one of the guys who did make the field was disqualified. That driver was Joe Nemechek behind the wheel of the RAB Racing number 29, who after making a fast lap in round 1 of qualifying was set to roll off in 24th. However, upon discovering an improperly sealed oil tank encasement, NASCAR was not shy to disallow his time and essentially ban him from making the race. Since Sorensen was scored as the first of the drivers who failed to qualify, he was then allowed to line up in the back and take the green flag on Sunday. Needless to say, he was making the most of his second chance, and it appeared he had the speed to potentially give his circling number 36 team their first top 10 of the season. On the other side of the running order, the car which the leaders just overlapped was the 32 Go-Fast racing entry of Terry Labonte. Labonte, the 2-time champion, was making his planned final career start after having competed at least part-time in every single Cup Series season since 1978. And even at 57 years old, he was still fairly competitive on the super speedways, as he finished an impressive 11th in that year's Coke 0400. but as it was already apparent, he would have some serious work to do if he wanted to end his storied career with another good result. Anyway, the race continued under the green flag all the way until lap 60 when the first crash of the day broke out. It happened when the leader of the outside line, Jamie McMurray, got loose all by himself and hooked down the track into Keselowski and McDowell before sliding back up and causing Joey Logano to spin through the grass. Luckily, no one else was involved in the incident, and all drivers would be able to return to the race, though McMurray went multiple laps down due to repairs, which ended the back-to-back hopes for the defending race winner. Leading the race back underway was Jimmy Johnson, who, after already making his way back up to second prior to the caution, was able to win the race off pit road thanks to a two-tire stop. Meanwhile, the prior leader of Casey Kane was dropped back to restart in the fourth row after his team opted for 4 tires. On the restart, there was no contest between the inside and outside lines as the Hinder teammates of Johnson and Dale Jr. worked together to get a huge run at the start-finish line and easily pulled ahead of Truex and Sorensen. Their coordination paid off in a big way because now with their fast cars out in clean air, the duo would lead all of the next 40 laps. With the junior out front in lap 103, their reign would only come to an end due to the second caution of the day, and this sent for a much bigger crash. Right as the second wave of green flag pit stops was starting, Eric Almirola gave a bad push to JJ Yeley in the backstretch, causing him to lose control and hook a hard right into the outside wall. Almirola then spun left down across the track, leaving nowhere to go for Yeley's BK Racing teammate Alex Bowman, who had hit the 43 hard on the driver's side. In the midst of all the checking up, Tony Stewart, Brian Vickers, and Thierry Labonte would also go for a spin, with the latter two staying clean, and Stewart making decent contact with the inside wall. However, in the back of the pack, Austin Dillon failed to slow down the same rate as Kyle Busch in front of him, spinning Busch across the nose of AJ Allmendinger and sending him hard into the inside wall. Busch was forced to go to the garage initially, and though his crew would later send him back out some 40 laps down, the driver who entered the race second in points would need his competitors to face similar issues or else face elimination from the playoffs. All while this chaos was unfolding, the Hillman-Circle Sport teammates of Castle and Cavapel were safely on pit road for their scheduled green flag pit stops. And even better for them, the caution flew before they would be in danger of losing a lap to the leaders, so they would both line up inside the top 5 for the restart once the prior leaders were forced to pit under caution. When the green flag waved, the outside lane led by Ryan Blaney took off much better than the inside, and thanks to strong pushing from Kevin Harvick, Castle would pull into second place. Coming out of turn 4, Blaney let off his guard just enough for Castle to use his momentum to shoot to the outside and clear Blaney at the line to lead his first lap of the race. Surprisingly, it wouldn't be the first green flag lap Castle had led that season, though, as in the Coke Zero 400 at Daytona, he was out front for 5 circuits before becoming caught up in a massive late race crash that relegated him to a P31 finish. But anyway, he would get out of line the next lap and begin to fade back over the next several laps. By lap 120, the dominant cars of the race of Johnson and Dale Jr. had returned to running 1-2, but still the Circle Sport drivers were holding their own in the pack, riding around the 15th position. The racing had also calmed down quite a bit since the restart, and the outside lane would begin to fade out as a whole as the run went on, until eventually all of the first 10 cars were holding single file on the inside. Then, with Johnson still leading on lap 131, the caution would fly for the third time that day when Michael McDowell cut a right front tire and shot up hard into the outside wall. McDowell had been racing far behind the lead pack due to his damage from the first crash, in which he was hit in the right front by Jamie McMurray, more than likely the reason why his tire cut down. Regardless, that would mark the end of the day for the 95 team. With just over 50 laps to go at the restart, everyone would have to pit at least one more time for fuel, but let's be real, pit strategy would probably be the least of any driver's concerns at the end of a super speedway race. This time when the race went back green, Johnson was able to defend his lead, and despite being passed briefly by Brad Keselowski, he would go on to lead all but one of the next 28 laps. But unfortunately, in the case of the defending and then 6-time Cup champion, leading would not be enough to advance to the next run of the playoffs, as at that point in the race, he was still 4 points short of the cut line, and thus would either need to win or for his opponents to suffer some serious issues. With 23 to go, Johnson would finally falter by misjudging the momentum of the pack and allowing none other than Danica Patrick to get past him on the outside. And her car was not the only pink one in the top 5, as over the course of that run, the 33 of Travis Cavapel had slowly inched his way up through the field and was able to reach as high as 3rd place at one point. Over the next few laps, Danica held strong out front, and the first 10 or so cars had begun to pull away in a single-file line while the rest continued to battle 3 wide all the way back. Coming to the line with 20 laps left, Cavapel became the first driver to drop into the pits for the final green flag pit stop of the day, giving up 9th place on track in what I would call an interesting pit strategy to say the least. No one else went with him that lap or at all until with 16 to go, a handful of the Fords would come down for either 2 tires or fuel only. They all made it on and off clean, but the next lap when the majority of the lead pack came down, it was anything but.
Next lap, here comes the leader. Oh, Kevin Harvick with some contact at the back of the pack, spun around.
After this 43, you're clear. Just go ahead.
Coming out of the pits, Kyle Larson spun out after getting loose on the apron, and just like the last round of green flag pit stops, the caution would come out before everyone had the chance to pit. And benefiting once again was the 40 of Landon Castle, who was in the middle of his pit stop and had not yet been passed by the prior leaders on track when the yellow flag flew. Thanks to the second big break of his race, Castle would line up on the restart in 3rd place right behind the new leaders of Ryan Newman and Trevor Bayne. With just 9 to go when the race went back green, the inside line prevailed by and large as the first 3 in that line of Newman, Castle, and Patrick pulled out into 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place. Looking at the playoff bubble, it was looking more and more likely that for Keselowski, Johnson, and Earnhardt, a win would be their only ticket into the next round. And for Kyle Busch, who was riding around nearly 50 laps off the leaders, and a few points below the cut line, all he could do was prevent everyone else's downfall. Racing into turn 4 with 5 to go, Newman still held on to the top spot, but much to the relief of the mid-pack drivers in the middle of 4 wide, the caution would come out again, this time just for debris. Everyone had enough fuel to make it to the end, so after a few laps under yellow, the race restarted with the same running order as before, Newman and Keselowski making up the front row, and Logano and Johnson tucked behind. When the green flag waved for the first green-white checkered attempt, Johnson and his Hendrick teammates of Kane and Earnhardt immediately pulled out of line to form a 3rd line on the outside. But before they had a chance to build up a good run, Greg Biffle clipped the left rear of Junior's car and spun him in front of the pack. Being hit in the door side by Junior, Paul Menard then hooked right into the outside wall, collecting the 7 of Michael Annett, while the 38 of David Gillen also received some light damage. Though Junior miraculously avoided any serious hits, it was clear that his chances of winning were shot, and so were his chances at advancing in the playoffs. So for the second green-white checkered attempt, it would still be Newman and Keselowski up front, with Keselowski still just 2 points below the cut line. Johnson, now 19 points removed from the good, was almost surely in a must-win situation, and Kyle Busch, sitting a single point back, was just as helpless as before. Meanwhile, both the Hillman-Circle Sport cars had managed to avoid all the carnage and were holding on to good track position, with Castle and Cavapel restarting 10th and 17th respectively. After hanging in the lead pack all day and both racing into the top 5 at times, if they could bring it home where they were currently at, their day would be a total success. But for the final 2 laps of the Geico 500 and the decision as to who would make up the next round of the playoffs, I'm going to hand it over to the broadcast to carry the rest of the way.
Change hands here in these last 2 laps. He might sneak in, he might be left out. We're about to find out.
Mike Logano timed that pretty perfectly to be right on the bumper of the 2.
Oh, trouble, Trevor Bayne.
He's going to save it.
Looked like maybe off the nose of Jimmy Johnson. We stay under green. But for how long? Keselowski's clear of Newman. Now Kevin Harvick makes a run to the outside lane. Matt Kenseth was pushing him. Logano to block.
That's left his teammate out there all alone, though.
To the white flag. Ryan Newman to the outside of Keselowski. Newman leads at that line. Who leads at the next one?
But you got to get back to the front because a caution can happen and you can be out of luck. Keselowski really doesn't have the help that he's going to need to win this race.
And he must win it.
But he's in good shape now because Newman has no push.
Here comes Landon Castle behind Matt Kenseth, behind Brad Keselowski.
But watch Kenseth, he can still make a move.
Landon Castle to the outside. Tri-oval. Sprint to the checkered flag. Who wins? Brad Keselowski wins it at Talladega.
Yeah!
In an incident-free finish that showcased peak driver ability all around, it was Brad Keselowski who fended off Newman and Kenseth to win his way into the round of 8. Because of his advancement, the former 8th-place driver in points, Casey Kane was bumped below the cut line, where he would join his teammates of Jimmy Johnson and Dale Jr. in a devastating 3-car round of 12 exit. In fact, if not for Kyle Busch's misfortune, all 4 Hendrick cars could have been eliminated, as Jeff Gordon only advanced by 3 points over Kane and 7 over Busch. But of course, regarding the elephant in the room, both Hillman-Circle Sport cars would go on to finish inside the top 10, with Landon Castle scoring his career best of 4th, and Travis Kvapil matching his best of 6th from all the way back in 2008 at the same track. With no assistance from crashes, both drivers expertly made their way up through the pack, gaining several positions each in just 2 laps, and Castle even leading the outside line at the stripe. In the years that followed, Castle would go on to compete for many more small teams in the Cup Series, such as Front Row Motorsports, Starcom Racing, and most recently Spire Motorsports. Throughout all that time, which included 4 more full-time campaigns, it wasn't until this past year in 2022 when he finally scored his next top 5 finish, which came as another P4 in the Summer Daytona race. Unfortunately, though, sponsorship issues have prevented Castle from attempting a single race this season, not just in the Cup Series, but in NASCAR in general. So it is quite possible that his racing days have come to an end. For Kvapil, his top 10 in the 2014 Geico 500 was the last of his Cup Series career, and his last good race in general, as over the rest of 2014 and his final part-time Cup season in 2015, he was only able to record a best finish of 32nd. Kvapil still competed for underfunded teams in the Xfinity and Truck Series up until 2019, but has since retired from NASCAR. As far as the Hillman-Circle Sport team itself, that's where it gets interesting. After a mediocre rest of their 2014 season and a small step back in 2015, the team would never finish better than 13th with Landon Castle in the 2015 Coke Zero 400. And with their lack of sponsorship finally catching up to them, co-owners Joe Falk and Mike Hillman were forced to shut down their operations that off-season, but not on the best of terms with each other. See, with the implementation of the new charter system in 2015, only the Falk-owned number 33 car was granted a charter, because between RCR and Circle Sport, it had attempted to make every race for the past 3 years, unlike the Hillman-owned number 40. So when Falk attempted to merge Circle Sport with the Levine Family Racing and lease the charter to the 95 team, Hillman sued Falk in the belief that he was entitled to ownership of the charter. Apparently the suit was settled under undisclosed terms, with Falk maintaining ownership of the charter, and thus his partnership with Levine Family Racing continued on through 2016. Before the start of the 2017 season, though, Levine Family Racing purchased their own charter from Tommy Baldwin Racing, which prompted Falk to form a new partnership with Curtis Keyes' The Motorsports Group. That year, the Circle Sport-The Motorsports Group team brought back the number 33 car full-time with rookie driver Jeffrey Earnhardt on the ovals and Boris Said on the road courses. However, the team had a serious lack of speed and not only had a miserable best finish of 26th, but did not finish a single race in the lead lap. After that disaster of a season, the Motorsports Group would cease operations, and Falk, still with ownership of the charter, would partner with GoFast Racing from 2018 until their closure following the 2020 season, and then finally with Live Fast Motorsports from 2021 to the present day. So even though the Circle Sport name hasn't been used directly in the Cup Series since 2017, their founder and charter are still active in the sport, and therefore the argument could definitely be made that the team never really left. But that is all for today's video. If you guys did enjoy this one, please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more videos just like these. I should be able to upload at least twice more before I have to go back to college, so around that time expect maybe a 2-week or so window without any new videos. Then once that's over, I should be back to roughly once per week uploads like normal. For my next 2 videos, I'll probably be moving towards more original, sort of like random topic videos like the International Series 1 that did really well a while ago. But also make sure to continue on with more of these unique race videos and the Worthy That Bad series from time to time. And yeah, as always, if you guys have any suggestions for what you want to see on the channel, make sure to let me know in the comments. But yeah, that's all I've got to say for today. So until next time, peace out.